The popular audio streaming service Spotify has come under fire.
Spotify reporting earnings.
Spotify has offered a streaming service since 2008.
Spotify relies on subscribers.
Spotify makes a well-known brand.
Spotify was started in the year 2006 by Daniel Ek and Martin Lorentzon. And as of today, Spotify has 433 million users. In the last video where I spoke about the great music war between Apple Music, Google's YouTube, and Spotify, I specified how during the pandemic, while other companies were shutting down, Spotify grew by leaps and bounds. In fact, Spotify's shares soared to more than 70%, which is quite epic. Well, there are always two sides of a coin. On one side, as we see that Spotify has been growing crazily, yet on the other side, Spotify is still in humongous loss. Referring back to the previous video, I explained how Apple Music is making a $4 billion revenue, though it's an ecosystem product, when compared to Spotify, which is a standalone offering. A very interesting question is how come still Spotify is leading the music industry with the most number of users and defeating a giant company like Apple? Now, before I start, I just wanted to say do subscribe Alphause for brand as well as business stories, case studies and resources. Especially if you are an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a content creator, a small or medium business, a student or anyone who is a hustler, then you have hit home because we cover free and new business content just for you all. So hit the bell icon so that whenever a brand new story is out, you get notified instantly. Well, the story begins way back in the 1990s when music was distributed only through cassettes and CDs. And people around the world used to buy single music labels for $20 and more. There was no existence of music streaming as we see today. The disruption in this distribution happened when the internet was on the rise in the late 1990s and two college students named Sean Fanning and Sean Parker started Napster. Napster was a website which allowed anyone to download MP3 songs on their desktop and share it with their friends and family. Napster got very popular when people migrated from buying CDs and cassettes to downloading music for free, but obviously illegally. It had more than 60 million users. With this huge shift in the paradigm and consumer behavior, the music label companies and artists incurred a huge loss. Eventually, Napster went through multiple lawsuits and was forced to shut down. Though everyone thought that the previous distribution of music CDs and cassettes would be back. Well, nothing like that happened. Though Napster was down, a lot of other websites started similar offering of downloading music on their device, and the music industry as well as artists continued to incur losses. The then CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, came up with a breakthrough solution to ensure that people get cheap music and the music label as well as the artists get their worth of money. This solution was none other than iPod, which revolutionized the music industry. Yet, the issue was not everyone could have afforded the iPod, neither they could have afforded the old $20 albums. So there was still a huge gap in the market, and there was a huge demand also for a solution which could have allowed people using different devices to listen to music legally. By the year 2005, illegal download and distribution of music was on the rise, and in 2006 Spotify was born. The first 2 years, the founders of Spotify, Daniel and Martin, signed deals with record labels and artists, and they launched Spotify in the year 2008. A very interesting statistic is YouTube Music, which is owned by Google, is at a revenue of $19 billion. Apple Music is at a revenue of $4 billion. Yet Spotify, currently though at a revenue of more than $9 billion, is still incurring a loss of $581 million. So, a very curious question which would come to your mind is how come a company which is competing among the giants like Apple and Google, which is incurring a loss at this point of time, is still able to pioneer the music industry? What exactly is the secret sauce of Spotify? So, there are 3 elements you would need to know to answer this question. Firstly, what Spotify controls. Secondly, how Spotify makes money. And lastly, how Spotify is ruling the music market. Let's start with the first element. What Spotify controls. We all presume and assume that Spotify is a music streaming platform available on different devices including Apple devices. Well, you're wrong. Spotify is just not a music company, but it is an artificial intelligence company. Let me emphasize that again. Spotify is not a music company, but it is an artificial intelligence company. Spotify does not only sell subscription and advertisements, but more importantly, it sells behavioral data. The very first element, what Spotify controls, might make you curious and might give rise to two questions. The first is why, and the second is how. Well, my friend, music is a huge business. Most of the people think that Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Billie Eilish or Lady Gaga songs are always a hit. Yet, every artist needs to predict what vibe do their listeners like, what notes and beats make their listeners get on the dance floor or feel that emotion deeply. This prediction is not easy to make, and this data is provided to them by streaming platforms like Spotify. Are you confused? Well, let me explain the concept with an example. Hypothetically, if I give you data about a university where professors have no hands-on experience, where no real-world skills like negotiation, persuasion, and communication are taught, there are no clubs and no alumni association, there is no placement cell, and has a lot of uncertainty of the student's future. And on the other hand, I give you the data of a very prestigious recognized university where professors have more than 20 years of industry experience. They have mentorship sessions, they have clubs, associations, and a robust placement cell. And it also has a strong alma mater, and the previous record shows that their placements have been into MNCs and corporates. Then which university would you prefer to get admitted in? Well, if not all, but most of you will choose the latter, as there is a more certainty of your career and future aspirations. One of the most crucial things which you had here was past data, on which you could and would predict your future. Similarly, with behavioral data, artists, composers, and music labels predict which emotion, which specific beat or tune would they able to synchronize with their listeners. Additionally, they would be able to figure out which songs you like, which songs you love to share, and which songs are you listening on loop and a repeat. Now, Spotify sells this data to music composers, singers, and artists directly or indirectly as consultancy services. With this data, artists and music labels create not the same, but very similar beats, lyrics, and music which are predicted to be heard on repeat and which you share with your friends and family. Once you download and start using Spotify, they start collecting your data. Let's try to break down this a bit more. Suppose you searched for a song. The keyword which you put into the search tab of Spotify, the app is able to capture your song preferences. Let's say you went ahead and created a jazz playlist, or let's say a love playlist for yourself. Then Spotify is able to capture your mood and what's the general mood you are at that period of time. It might be cheerful, it might be more emotional, you get the idea. Spotify is also able to access your geographical location. Let's assume you are driving and listening to music. Then Spotify is able to capture which genre of song that you're listening in traffic, and then it would recommend you similar music which you would prefer to listen. Additionally, they know if you are using an Android or an Apple device and what's the average time you spend on the application. You might be listening more on your phone or a tablet than compared to laptop or desktop. Spotify knows this. Then this data of millions of people are processed and they try to find out a pattern, and through this pattern, artists and composers are able to predict which song has a higher probability of being a hit and which one can be a mediocre or an ordinary one. The Spotify algorithm is very similar to YouTube and Netflix and is very powerful enough to keep on recommending songs which you will listen to and spend more time on the platform. You might be assuming that Spotify would be making millions out of selling your data. Well, you're wrong. Spotify does sell their data, yet they don't earn money from artists, composers, or record labels. And this brings us to the second element of this case study, which is how Spotify makes money. Now, there are three factors which make Spotify so powerful. Number one, collaborative filtering. Your behavioral data and choices are compared with another person's behavioral data and choices, and eventually this collaborative data is compared to a third person's behavioral data. From both a geographical and a demographic perspective, Spotify is able to deduce which artist or song has a deeper sentiment and liking in both geographical perspective and a demographic perspective. With this, they come to a decision if that artist or song should be recommended to a wider audience, and also how many times they should recommend it. Well, this is how they make a decision after collaborative filtering. Factor number 2 is natural language processor or NLP. Now, just to set some context, natural language processing or NLP refers to the branch of computer science, and more specifically the branch of artificial intelligence AI concerned with giving computers the ability to understand text and spoken words in much the same way humans beings can. Through NLP, Spotify is able to capture a musician and artist's sentiment in a wider audience. They are able to process all the data on the internet like forums, social media platforms, discussion boards, news, blogs, videos, etc. And they are able to gauge the general perception of this song as well as the artist. Factor number 3 is implicit feedback system. Now, most music streaming companies have a way to collect feedback, and it can be through ratings or other parameters such as how often it's shared or liked. That's how streaming companies are able to contemplate how good or great a song is. Spotify is a bit different and uses a parameter of the song you replayed or heard on repeat. The higher the number, the higher the chance it would recommend it to a wider audience. Well, leveraging all these 3 factors, which is collaborative filtering, natural language processing or NLP, and implicit feedback system, Spotify as a company is able to recommend you the most likable songs you would want to hear, and is also able to show ads for non-premium users. Spotify's goal is clear. It is to ensure that users stay on their platform as long as possible, and showing personalized ads is equally crucial and important. It is critical for premium members that the platform provides the best and the most personalized recommendations possible, whether geography or location based or persona based, because the goal for premium users to continue to use premium membership. Spotify's 80% revenue come from the premium users, and the total number of premium users of Spotify is greater than Apple. Now, irrespective of your location, if you would compare, then you would realize that Apple Music and Spotify Premium are almost at par when it comes to pricing of features. So, the curious question is why the general population prefers Spotify over Apple Music. Lastly, this will bring us to our third element of this business case study, which is how Spotify is and will rule the market in the future. Well, if we take a step back, you would realize that Apple Music has 55% of podcast market share. In fact, today also, it is hovering somewhere between 40 to 50%. Yet, surprisingly, this 55% is only available to the world's 20% of the population, because Apple has a major flaw, and that is shareability. As a matter of fact, Apple Music is hardly used by non-Apple users, and it is tough to share your music playlist to other devices. When it comes to Spotify, it can be used on any other device, be it Android or Apple. Sharing with Spotify is really easy. In fact, if you are currently a Spotify user, I'm sure you would have shared a song with your loved ones. Well, this helps in creating something we can call the network effect. And Spotify as a company takes the most advantage of this. In fact, the irony is that Spotify uses your own data to sell you their Spotify Premium. The question is how? Well, a while ago, Spotify did a billboard campaign that was really successful. Well, Spotify being an online service, how come they did an ATL or above the line marketing strategy that was so successful? Well, on a side note, marketing is divided in 3 different categories: ATL, BTL, and TTL. So ATL is an abbreviation for above the line. This is a mass marketing strategy. Examples of ATL marketing strategies are television, magazines, radio, billboards, newspapers, and cinema. Moving on to the second one, BTL. BTL is below the line. This is more of a targeted marketing strategy. Examples of BTL marketing are email marketing, contextual text ads like PPC, messaging, banner ads, etc. And TTL, it's a mix of both ATL and the BTL. An example of TTL might be untargeted social media, or maybe events also. Now coming back to the story, Spotify's above the line marketing strategy, so they exactly mapped the billboards as per the geography and leveraged their collected data and matched them to people's preferences and emotional sentiments. So as per the sentiments, the billboards were placed. So for instance, people who are bound to get caught in traffic are naturally irritated and angry. Hence, They were shown cheerful and delightful music billboards. At business centers near corporate parks where there are a lot of startups, they put up angel investment billboards. You get the idea. Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You have no clue how data can be used to force you into choices and make decisions subconsciously. Now imagine a music streaming company with all this data can do so much. Then what companies like Meta, which owns Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, would be doing with the data that they collect from you. Now, if you learned something new today, please click the like button because the algorithm gods of YouTube would be very happy. And for more business case studies, business learning, lessons, and for resources, do subscribe to our channel Alphause. Check out this intriguing videos and deep dive into this great music war video. Click here. See you on the next episode. Until then, peace out.